Okay, good afternoon everybody, how are we all? Wow, that was even less overwhelming than this morning, and I know you've had coffee there. How is everybody this afternoon? Yay! It's good to be doing this face-to-face again. Thank you for maintaining social distancing, that's very nice of you to do that. And apologies to the guy over there at the back who couldn't find a seat anywhere with the rest of us and has had to pull up a chair all on his own there. I apologise for that. Oh, I thought there was some solution. If you did want to come a little bit further forward, I think this is as many as we're going to get. So if you want to kind of, it would be really good actually if you could kind of gather in so that you're all just in the camera shot. That would be great. And then it will look fabulous for Heather's show reel as she becomes famous. Okay, brilliant. So welcome to this track, which is all about talent and technology, something that I'm pretty passionate about. Having worked in L&D for around about 20 years. I know I don't look old enough. And had various job titles that have had both of those words in them, some of which I understood. So that's nice. I've been a talent manager, I've been a learning technologies manager, and what I'm hoping to get out of this session, as I'm sure many of you are, is figuring out what the hell is going on downstairs. Right? I have no idea what I need, but I feel like it's probably an employee experience layer that's delivered with the power of Netflix. It feels like that might be what I need. If only I could find something that was anything like that, that would be great. So I have the absolute pleasure of welcoming to the stage Heather this afternoon, who's going to help us with what's going on out there, what's been happening, and what all the latest research from RedThread Research tells us. So my role really is to just kind of keep you guys in mind because you look like you might get rowdy and a little bit out of hand. Encourage you to join in, ask questions. Would you like questions as they pop up into people's minds? Yeah, I think that's always the best way, right? So if you do have a question, just make yourself known. I'll run over with the microphone. We will have time at the end as well if you want to do it that way. Otherwise, we've got beer straight after this, which seems like a perfect opportunity, right? Yeah, we're in for a bit of that. Yeah? Excellent. Okay, in which case, without further ado, please welcome to the stage fabulous Heather Gilmartin-Adams.
Thank you, everyone. So I'm Heather Gilmartin-Adams with RedThread Research. Excited to talk to you, particularly today, focusing not just on the whole landscape of learning tech, because one of the things that we at RedThread have realized is that is such a big landscape now, even just compared to the last couple of years. So focusing today on coaching skills and internal mobility technology. I'm going to share some of the research that we've been doing recently. If you, for those of you who aren't familiar with RedThread, we are a human capital research and advisory firm. We focus on topics like learning and skills and diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging, performance management, people analytics, that kind of thing. Check out our website if you don't know us. And like I said, so today I'll just spend a couple of minutes sharing a few of the trends, some of which I know that we have heard about already today, shaping the talent landscape, the talent tech landscape. Then I'll share some of the research that we did last fall on coaching tech. Then you are the first people that I've shared any of this data with on the skills and internal mobility tech research. We just closed the survey a couple of weeks ago, so this is very new data that I'm really excited, especially I would love your feedback on it. So what insights are you getting from what I'm going to share? And then, like Anthony said, we'll save some time for Q&A, but because it is a relatively small group, please do ask questions as we go. If we want to make this a little interactive, that would be great. So, trends shaping talent. I have 5. This one, they've already been talking about it a bunch today, right? There is a shortage, or the talent market, right? The labor market, the tightening labor market. Sorry, I'm nervous. I'm gonna put this right out here. I was asked to do this. I'm stepping in for a colleague. I was asked to do this a week and a half ago. So please just like give me some good vibes. Okay. So anyway, you might be aware that a lot of people have quit their jobs recently, have gotten new jobs. So the data that's here that you see is that 4.5 million employees in the U.S. quit their jobs in November 2021. That's a US data point. I thought, I'm coming to the UK, let me look up a UK data point. Apparently in the last quarter, the number of open jobs hit a new high of 1.3 million. And that was the quarter that closed in February of 2022. So this is, it's a global phenomenon. And one of the things that's happening, therefore, our organizations are really concerned about retention, right? So in this survey, this tech survey that we just closed a couple of weeks ago, one of the questions we asked vendors was, what makes you unique in the market? What is your unique offering? And the number of them that said retention, we help our clients deal with retention or retain their employees. It was a lot. It was noticeable as I read through the data. So the vendors are very aware of this as well. They're trying to help organizations with this challenge. What I think is really interesting, though, is that it's not just a question of are we going to keep the same employees in the same roles that they've always been in, right? It's a question of how are we going to, and this is a question that I'm sure you've heard a zillion times already today, is how are we going to ensure that we have the right skills in the right places, at the right time, in the right quantities, at the right levels, et cetera. And that question can be answered with a combination of retention incentives and employee development, various types of employee development, including coaching and upskilling and reskilling and talent marketplaces, internal mobility in various forms. The second trend that's shaping the talent market is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. I loved what was said in this morning's keynote about diversity and diversity of thought. What I want to draw your attention to here is that in the last year, L&D's it's not just an organizational phenomenon, right? It's in L&D's involvement in and commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging has really grown. So the data that you see here is from LinkedIn Learning's annual workplace report. The red data is 2021, and the purple data is 2022. So you see the plans to deploy DEIB and L&D's ownership or responsibility for DEIB efforts in organizations has grown. And what that means is that L&D must be thinking not just about how are we deploying more unconscious bias training programs, or how are we dealing with diversity compliance regulations, that kind of thing. We need to be thinking much more broadly about how are we creating, I love this term, I heard this term a few weeks ago for the first time, development equity or learning equity, right? How are we ensuring that the programs, that our employees have equitable access? The next trend is simply that the tech in this space can simply do more than it used to, even just 3-4 years ago. So, the ability of machine learning and AI, I know AI is a huge buzzword, but the ability to provide sort of nuanced, personalized insights, particularly in the HR space around people problems, the technology has grown by leaps and bounds. The fourth trend is hybrid work. You might be familiar with this one as well. We're all working differently. I think what's really interesting about this is, so we all, 2 years ago, right, an upheaval, everyone had to figure out how to work differently. Over the last 2 years, those new patterns have kind of crystallized, but I think there's a question of whether they have crystallized into the right forms and the right patterns, right? So as we are returning to work, as we are shifting to some sort of hybrid something, now is an opportunity maybe to, like, if you think about like a bone that's set wrong, right? It's an opportunity to re-break those bones and put them back together in a way that makes maybe a little bit more sense, right? So organizations now have this opportunity to be a little bit more intentional about when do we come into the office, why do we come into the office, who comes into the office, to perform what tasks, not even who in what role, but for what activities are we going to be together versus separate. And the fifth trend is simply that work is more human. And a lot of these technologies that we're going to be talking about actually help organizations make more human, more personalized, more empathetic decisions. So those are very quickly the 5 trends shaping the major trends that we saw shaping tech talent. So the tightening labor market, DEIB, the fact that tech, particularly applied to HR problems, can do more, hybrid work, and work being more human. So I'm going to answer this question within this landscape: why focus on coaching skills and mobility tech? Would anyone like to try and answer that question? Or do you have a perspective on how are these, within this landscape, why focus on these particular technologies specifically? Yeah.
Maybe the personalizations.
Yeah. So for those of you who can hear, she said maybe because of personalizations. Yes. So that is one of the big reasons. What I think is most interesting about these is their ability to really help us do work differently and to learn differently. So what we're going to be talking about is the definition of what coaching is. Coaching tech has sort of exploded that definition. Skills are helping us sort of break apart what work is and think about, like I said, for the hybrid work example, right? So thinking about who needs what skills to do what activities where. That's a much more granular problem than sort of who in what roles is going to do what job. These technologies in particular are helping us learn and work in very different ways. And the thing that I find really, really exciting about it is I think we don't even know yet what all those ways are. I think there's a lot of potential to do some rethinking about how we might leverage these technologies to do work in different ways. So let me share some of this research that we did on coaching tech. I'm going to share with you a couple of trends in the space, and then I'll end with the vendor map, the landscape, and how we categorize the vendors in this space. So this data is taken from a survey that we did mid last year, mid 2021, and about 35 vendors answered the survey. All of these vendors said that they did coaching, and we didn't ask them, we didn't provide a definition of coaching, right? Because part of what we were wanting to understand was how is coaching being defined today by vendors. So if they said that they did coaching, we took them at their word, we let them answer the survey. And what you see is that the space is growing. So there are more vendors, more coaching tech vendors in the space, and about 2/3 of them said that their revenue grew steadily between 2018 and 2021. And the third bullet says, this growth is not just in standalone technologies, but also in coaching functionalities that are being added to larger learning platforms. And I said that the coaching tech is sort of exploding the definition of coaching. So this graphic is what we ended up publishing at the end of our research. And what you see is that, if you think of coaching, I think most people are thinking of sort of a one-on-one, probably executive leadership type coaching, right? There's a person, a human who is a coach, and a human who is a coachee, and they meet and they talk about, what can help this coachee be a better executive or a better leader, right? And that is what you see here in the top left, traditional professional coaching. But what we heard from vendors was much, much more than that, right? So we heard of vendors who talk about doing drop-in coaching where any employee can schedule a 30-minute session to talk about whatever problem they're having right at that moment. We talked a lot about self-coaching where there are tools that are provided so that people can help do some self-reflection and improve themselves. Manager as coach, I'm sure you've heard a lot about the need for developing managers and teaching managers how to be coaches, right? Particularly if an organization wants to develop a coaching culture, how do we help managers become better coaches to help establish that? Embedded coaching, team coaching, coaching circles, peer coaching, all of these are ways for people to connect with one another for sort of group coaching in some way. And then large-scale coaching is sort of where an AI or a machine of some sort provides data and feedback to an individual employee to help them improve or to drive some sort of programmatic culture change. So the interesting thing here is that pretty much all of the other 8 of these are more scalable than one-to-one professional coaching, right? So how many of you have heard from leadership or heard this idea of democratizing coaching? And yes, we want to push as much coaching as possible out to as many people as possible. I think it's a great idea, right? Because it's an extremely helpful form of development. It's a little bit more personalized than some other forms of development. It sends the message that we care about you as an employee. So there are lots of reasons to want to scale coaching, and the problem is often cost. And so some of these other types of coaching help with that problem. Another trend that we saw is when we asked vendors what types of coaching or what topics they coached on, the variety of answers we got was much bigger than what you might think of from traditional coaching, right? So we saw business and leadership coaching. Most of the vendors offer those types of coaching, but we also saw some increases in vendors that are offering well-being coaching, health and fitness coaching, and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging coaching. So the content matter, the subject matter, right, is expanding. We also found that vendors were offering more functionalities in the tech. So if you think about sort of the most traditional coaching tech, what it did was basically tried to streamline some of the admin tasks associated with coaching. So matching coaches with coachees or scheduling coaching sessions. The tech vendors that we talked to do that still, but they're doing a lot of other interesting things too, right? So they are using AI algorithms to do more nuanced or more accurate matching between coaches and coachees. They are using using bots or using the AI to deliver nudges to employees to prompt some kind of behavior change or to provide information that would be helpful as they are stepping into a given situation. Machine delivery of coaching. So this is like, for example, if any of you have heard of Cultivate, they scrape email and provides insights to managers about how they're communicating with their teams, for example. And that kind of feedback can really help an individual adjust their behavior. We saw a lot of vendors who are integrating with work tech, right? So who are providing insights via Teams or Slack or whatever other work technology we want to talk about. And also the absorption of work tech data. So Cultivate is actually an example of that as well, where they're taking in information from other business systems and digesting it and providing it back to managers or even sometimes employees as insights that then that person can make some shifts. Those are the trends. Let me just pause there. Are there any questions before I show the tech landscape and how we divided it up? Yeah.
Quick question on the security and sort of the privacy connected to sort of you mentioned collecting data from emails and Teams.
Yes. So we didn't dig into that. So because I don't have a great answer for you. Basically, vendors are aware of it. Some vendors, actually this is a mobility vendor that I'm thinking of right now, but they were very, very careful when they were developing their skills algorithm, for example. They did actually a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging review to ensure that their skills definitions were equitable. So some vendors are doing that kind of thing, sort of self-reviewing their own technology. But I think mostly they're at a point where they're saying, we're going to partner, whoever we're trying to sell to, we're going to partner with them and understand data privacy needs. It very heavily depends on what country you're in, and how and what industry you're in. So they seem to be taking it on a little bit of a case-by-case basis. Okay, so this is how we categorized the coaching tech landscape. When we were thinking about how are people, or how are organizations making buying decisions, what are they caring about when they're selecting a tech vendor? There were really two, criteria that they were primarily using. There were other factors as well, but these two seem to be the most salient for this model. So on the horizontal axis, you have what kind of resources are available for the coaching. So is there internal data or are there internal resources, either people in terms of potential internal coaches, or data in terms of what can be scraped, what types of content or work data, or are there internal resources, or do the buyers need to primarily rely on external resources, so external coaches or external frameworks or content or that kind of thing. So the vendors that offer primarily internal resources or rely primarily on internal resources are more to the left. Those that provide external resources are more to the right. And then the second criteria, which you see on the vertical axis, is does the organization believe that coaching needs to happen with a human or not? And so the vendors that primarily provide human coaching are at the top, and vendors that primarily provide machine coaching are towards the bottom. So that gives you 4 quadrants. I'll go around from the top right around this way. So quadrant 1 are vendors that provide human coaches using external resources. So these are maybe your most traditional tech vendors, or coaching tech vendors. So if you think of coaching tech, probably my guess is that BetterUp or something like that is what pops into your mind. That's what this quadrant is, right? It's companies that have a giant pool of external coaches that they vet, right? So providing quality coaches is a big value proposition for these vendors. And then they take all of the administration and matching and scheduling and the platform where the coaching is going to happen, right? That's what these vendors provide. Here on the top left, quadrant 2, this is human coaches and internal resources. So these are, for example, if an organization has a lot of internal coaches or people that want to be internal coaches, but they need a way of helping those people become coaches in a standardized way. They need a place for scheduling and logistics and that kind of thing. So these vendors help with that kind of a problem, right? So, Then quadrant 3 is machine coaches and internal resources. So this is more tech. This is tech providing the coach, or and I'm not, by coach I don't mean like a avatar or anything like that. I mean machine provided insights to individuals, right? And so these are the types of companies that might do nudges, right? So Eris does text-based nudging, so Cultivate I've already mentioned a couple of times, right? They're the ones that are providing insights based on so this is based on internal data that these companies are ingesting and then providing insights to the right people at the right time. And then quadrant 4 is machine coaches and external resources. So these are companies that maybe have an external database of maybe the ways that certain skills could be developed, or a framework, maybe like a leadership framework, and they have a program that they can lead you through that's an automated type of program, or automated type of delivery. So that's what these vendors are providing. Questions on the coaching tech landscape?
Do you get
Yeah.
a feel, which is my Thanks. Did you get a feel from the research from people around the, if you like, the effectiveness or efficacy of types of coaching? And if they could kind of tie that to like a particular need? It's really fascinating to see how you've plotted that.
Yeah, so it's not like one particular quadrant is more effective than any other quadrant, right? Like, and sometimes actually on these kinds of 2x2s, up and to the right is better. That is certainly not the case for this one, if that's what you're asking. In terms of the specific efficacy of any given program, I would say it's very similar to what you've been hearing in terms of learning impact and learning analytics more generally, right? If you're tying it to the business case and you're trying, you actually, that is a very nice lead into what I'm going to talk about on the next slide, which is considerations for buyers. And the first consideration is know what problem you're trying to solve, right? Did that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you may not, that may not be the purpose behind your research, but it's really interesting to see how you make that the whole coach and tech combinations.
Yeah. I
just wondered if any of that kind of insight had come through, perhaps in comments or additionality with the research as to, it's where I imagine some people might look at that, or maybe some people sort of C-suite or execs might go, oh, we could automate what we do with people, and it could be better, it could be more quantifiable, or it could be more cost effective, or it could be more effective, or we can save money, or things like that. So I'm just wondering if you saw or were able to identify anything like that.
Yeah. So it is certainly not the case that any one quadrant or any one vendor is more effective than any other. I think to your question, well, I'm just going to repeat what I said. It really is a matter of understanding the problem you're going to solve, then choosing the coaching intervention that will, well, actually, you know what, so I'm just going to, okay, so what are you going to solve? Then why is coaching the best option, right? So that's the next, to get to the impact, right? What you need to ask yourself, what problems can we solve? Can it be solved by coaching? Then, if so, which type of coaching? And to your point, what are your constraints? So are you trying to be as cost effective as possible? Are you trying to provide coaching to as many people as possible? Which are, those might be trade-offs that you have to think about. Are you trying to drive a particular behavior change in the organization, right? Anthony works a lot on digital transformation. So if you're using coaching to help prompt some sort of behavior change around whether people are going to move to a digital platform or not, right? So depending on what exactly you're trying to achieve and what your constraints are, that's going to, that is what should influence your decision of coaching, or your choice of coaching tech. And then the final consideration for buyers is what will it interact with, both at the programmatic level and at the data or tech levels. Right? So in the examples that I just gave, coaching is likely not going to be the only piece of that intervention or that puzzle, right? So if you're doing coaching to drive a behavior change, then there's likely some other pieces of that learning intervention that are gonna be part of that learning intervention, right? So maybe you're doing some baseline education, maybe you're doing some coaching, maybe you're doing some experiential something or other, right? And so how are those pieces gonna fit together? And then also at the level of the technology, how is this piece of technology going to, where is it gonna pull data from? Where is it gonna push data to? Are two big questions that you wanna answer before you make a decision. Thank you for leading me to that slide. Other questions? Yes.
I'm not even sure what my question is, to be honest. I find myself at sort of an intersection. So I work as a human coach, and there's been a lot of this around on the exhibition floor today as well. Like I've sort of bumped into the AI conversation about coaching a couple of times today. I feel like I've been in a hut for the last couple of years. So like, oh yeah, this stuff's happening. And I find myself kind of throwing up things about ethics and things about data and what data are we storing on people. I don't really know what my questions are around them, but I feel like there's a conversation to be had around this stuff.
Yeah.
And I also know that in my world, in that kind of coaching world, this is not the type of conversation that coaches have.
Yes.
And I think we think we're a rarefied bunch sometimes. And we think that, we're coaches. You need to be human. So there's something quite challenging in this, which I like.
Yeah.
So I don't really have a question, but I'm just I'm enjoying the challenge of it.
Yes. So a couple of thoughts in response to that. One is on your point of, is this coaching or not? Every time I have a couple of good friends who are like transformational coaches, right? So they work at really sort of deep level, and that type of work cannot. I tend to agree cannot be done with a bot. However, there's all types of. There are lots of different other types of coaching or other topics that can be done by a bot or by machine-driven insights, perhaps even better than a human coach, right? So I heard at one point, I used to work for a company that made a difference between executive coaching and implementation coaching, right? So if you're trying to implement some kind of change, then maybe a machine-driven coach could work a little bit better. Or, at one point during this research, we briefed with a company that does machine coaching for sales, customer support representatives, right? And this tech was able to provide feedback. So it would ask, the customer would hang up from the call. The tech would, the customer would hang up from the call. They would answer a customer NPS question, right? Or provide like a couple of feedback data points. That information would be then sent back to the customer service representative before they got on the next call, so that they could incorporate that feedback on a moment-to-moment basis. So point being, I think that there's a place for both. Can I get a time check? Oh, 25 minutes. Okay. Yes.
You mentioned experiential learning. You mentioned the difference between coaching versus perhaps more AI, etc. Something that's very much present downstairs, which has been fascinating, is the VR element of coaching. Either the scripts and the dialogues are already loaded and you enter into that pure still learning experience, or even better, you've got the streaming opportunity where you're with your coach, but you're not in the same space at the same time. Does this feature anywhere in your study?
Yeah. So I think the most where's your version? Yeah. So they tend to sit kind of here-ish. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm sorry. Let me keep going, and then if we have time, I would love to save time for questions for later. So this, as I mentioned, this is the first time that I've shared this data with anyone. You're getting a sneak peek, and I'm really curious for your feedback. We have not, so all that we've done thus far is surveyed the vendors. We have not actually briefed them. So we have a less of a nuanced understanding of this space than we did with the coaching, which is also part of the reason that I'm excited to have this conversation with you. So this is not in no particular order because we haven't created a model yet. But these are all of the skills and mobility tech vendors that we know of. I'm sure there are more. I'm sure that I will find a few downstairs when if I walk around long enough. And they kind of run the gamut from what you might consider sort of traditional content providers to LXPs who are thinking about employee mobility in various ways to what you might the more established sort of talent marketplaces. And similar to coaching, revenue has grown considerably for these vendors in the last couple of years. So this data we asked in the last 3 years, so that started in 2019. Exactly 0 vendors said that their revenue has declined. So 23 of them answered the question. 21 of them said it's grown steadily. 2 of them said it has remained the same, which is just crazy growth, right? most vendors, so the question we asked them was, do you focus on skills, mobility, both, or neither? And as you can see, about 2/3 of them focus on both skills and mobility. About 1/3 of them focus on skills, and one of them said that they focus on just mobility, but then in their written comments, they actually say that they provide insights on skills and internal mobility. So after we brief with them, this chart might change to include nobody that does just mobility. And I think that's less a reflection of whether a vendor could do mobility without skills, but rather the recognition that skills are a really strong foundation or an established foundation for doing internal mobility efforts. Yeah.
Can I just double check what you mean by mobility?
Yes, interesting question. So we, again, like coaching, we did not define it. And the sort of implicit definition that we got from the vendors in their written comments was a combination of employee development in various ways, plus talent marketplace. So helping employees be upwardly mobile or career mobile or reskilling, upskilling, helping an individual prepare to move, as well as the technology that actually facilitates a movement to a new job or to a new skill, to a new project. Awesome. I'm glad. Thank you for asking that. So this is an interesting question. So I was surprised. The question that we asked, we gave them like 15 different functionalities, and we said, please rate on a scale of 1 to 5 the extent to which you provide this functionality. And what you're seeing here is the percentage of vendors who said 5, right? So they provide this functionality to a very great extent. And 66% of vendors said they provide skills tracking to a very great extent. And that was what you're seeing in the red are the top 3 functionalities of that list, and the purple are the bottom 3 functionalities, right? So I kept out the middle just for visual simplicity for you all. But so skills tracking and skills lists, by which I mean sort of a LinkedIn, the vendor provides a bunch of lists, a bunch of skills, and employees can go through and say whether they have those skills or not. So skills were in the top, two of the top provided functionalities have to do with skills. 2 of the bottom provided functionalities have to do with marketplaces. So I think it's a really interesting for me story that skills tracking has become table stakes, right? This is sort of what everyone is trying to provide, and I think it's because that's the question that vendors are being asked, right? Like the question that organizations are trying to wrap their heads around right now is, what skills do I have and what skills do I need? And so that's the question that most vendors have been working on for the longest. And so it is the functionality, I think, that's most developed. This is also a slight caveat here. It's also a function of the math, right? Because if you think of the slide I just showed you, 1/3 of the vendors in this data set only focus on skills. So they're sort of inherently removing themselves from providing marketplace functionalities. Does that make sense? So the next 3 slides all have to do with different types of what can organizations or employees do with data? How does the data, what does the data relationship look like? And so this question, the question that we asked, the top question was, to what extent do you push data to these various systems, right? So we said, to what extent do you push data to an HR system, to a learning system, to various business systems? And then the purple is, to what extent do you pull data from these systems, right? And again, we had them rate, from 0 to 5. And the percentage that you're seeing is the percent of vendors that said that they either pull or push to a very great extent. So what I think is interesting here is that, with the exception of pulling data from HR systems, all of this is below 50%, right? So my takeaway from that is that vendors' ability to really flow data in ways that organizations would want them to is still developing, right? I'm sure it's something they're working on, right? If you listen to any of the sessions today, I'm like, at least the sessions that I've been sitting in, right? This idea of data integration and don't take a vendor at their word if they say they have open API, et cetera. So I think everyone is very well aware of this problem. And I think that this is just empirical evidence that, you know, all of us know that we're not quite where we want to be. So this question was, the question was, what does your offering enable organizations to do with their data, right? So we said, does your offering allow organizations to see their current skills data? Do they allow you to, does your offering allow organizations to analyze their skills data by location, by skill level, by demographics? Does your offering allow organizations to compare your workforce's skills to external benchmarks, and so on? And again, I've selected the red are the top functionalities in the list, and the purple are the bottom functionalities in the list. And I took out a few that were in the middle, just so that I didn't have so much on the slide. So again here, I think what's interesting, right, is that there's a bunch of stuff about skills on the top, there's a bunch of stuff, and mobility is the very bottom, right? So comparing mobility to external benchmarks is the very bottom. And also comparing skills to external benchmarks is the very bottom. So I think, you know, the overarching story for me is that we're just further forward on skills than we are in some of these other areas. One of the other pieces, though, that I wanted to pull out is that the ability to analyze skills by demographics to a great extent is still only at 34%. So if you're thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in your organization, and I very much agree with the point this morning about cognitive diversity, like definitely agree with that. However, demographics is also, you know, it's something that we want to be looking at if it's at all possible, right? And I know that there are different regulations depending on which country you're in, and I know some companies keep like a really clear wall between employee demographics and some of the other data. So I understand that there are potential challenges to that. But I'm speaking on a panel tomorrow about the DEIB and learning, and I feel pretty passionately that like we as learning professionals need to be analyzing whatever data we can to see where there are inequities, and this is one of the pieces of data that is hugely important to us, right? And then the last question that we asked, or the last piece of data that I'm going to share with you, is what can employees do with their data? And maybe this is to your point about data and ethics. Some of my colleagues at RedThread do a lot of research in people analytics, and one of the big questions there is what control do employees have over their own data? Right? How can they see their, you know, what can they see? What can they edit? What can they see about others? So we asked some parallel questions on this survey. We asked vendors, you know, what is your, same wording as the last question, right? What does your offer, to what extent does your offering allow employees to do these various things? And this is actually the whole list. These were all the things we asked them. I didn't pull anything out of the middle for this one. And you see there's just this giant gap between being able to see their own skills data and correct their own skills data. That's pretty common, right? So over 50% of vendors do that to a great extent, which I think is great, right? For two reasons. One is we want employees to have control over their own data. And two, if we're thinking about this challenge of like how do we get employees to fill out their own skills profiles, et cetera, how do we get data about their skills? If vendors are enabling employees to see and correct their data, then that's one way that we can ensure that, you know, that process is happening. But then you have this huge jump, and all these other things which are extremely beneficial to an individual employee are not enabled all that much, right? So we have comparing your skills to peers within the organization, right? Like if I'm an employee and I want to be, you know, I want to know, let's say, data analyst, right? That's everyone's favorite example. I'm a data analyst and I want to be a data scientist, and I want to know, you know, what skills do the other data scientists in the organization have and at what level? I want to be able to see that, right? And the percentage of vendors that are doing that to a great extent, that are enabling that type of analysis are, not very many, 24%. And similarly to being able to, employees being able to see data about other people, other employees' mobility, et cetera. Yep.
Yeah, I've got 2 questions to kind of observations.
Yep.
And I think this topic is very relevant at the moment in the UK. We think about a lot of the drive around local skills improvement plans, levelling up, etc., all very much focused on mobility. It's one of the things that it highlights is a sort of a transition from employers thinking about jobs and roles and starting to think far more about skills. So that just observation, which is obviously a very beneficial thing in terms of thinking about mobility, transition of workforce, etc. And the other thought that occurred to me is, by definition, it feels like it's the kind of service marketplace at the moment that favours large organisations, and therefore if you're an employee of a large organisation. But if you're not an employee of a large organisation, where do you sit then in your sort of ecosystem of personal development? And that's the bit where I think some of the quadrants of automation might start to open opportunities at an individual level, as well as an organisational employee level. So if you're an individual wanting to think about transition or changes, could you start to interact with some of these systems more directly?
That's a really great observation and a great point. And the answer is, I'm actually not sure. I don't know whether, if I, as an individual, could I go to Gloat or Eightfold and say, I want to see some of this. I mean, a lot of the skills data lakes, the databases, draw very heavily from ONET, which is a publicly available, resource. So that is a place to start. And ONET actually has its own skills profile. Yeah, profile and like assessment. You can go through and say like, hey, these are the skills I have, and it'll give you job titles that that kind of match that. So it has some basic functionality. It's very clunky, but I think it's a very, very good point that most of these technologies are relying on big data and are intended to function best in big organizations. Yeah. Yeah.
Just a quick question. Do you have any insight in terms of how these vendors are measuring skills beyond self-report?
Yeah, so a lot of them still rely very heavily on self-reporting. So, when I said skills tracking is sort of table stakes, what most of those vendors are doing are asking employees, hey, give us your list of skills, or choose from this list, right? Click, and saying, okay, these are the skills. So that functionality is there. The measurement, let me actually see, did I put it on the slide? Because we asked them, yeah, so measuring and verifying skills are in this middle piece here. So some vendors are offering, but like less than 55% are offering skills verification and skills measurement to a very great extent. The ways that some of them do it, depending on the industry that they're selling into, some of them, if they're selling into primarily sales organizations, or if they're selling into, like there's one vendor that works a lot with healthcare organizations. If they're doing that, then they sometimes have a little bit clearer benchmarks about what good looks like, and then they're measuring employees against that. But that's not always the case, and it's particularly not the case with soft skills. Let's see, I think I have one, oh, no. Yeah, so considerations for buyers. A couple of ideas here, right? The first is, where will you start? And really that's a prompt to start somewhere. So one of the things that we've heard a lot from organizations that are embarking on a skills journey is that they feel like it's this massive undertaking. And and sometimes get a little bit of analysis paralysis because they're trying to understand the whole world before they start. And our prompt is to pick a place to start and iterate from there. That seems to be, so RedThread has a podcast about skills. I keep looking at Pona because I know that she listens to the podcast.
And we recommend.
Anyway, yeah, and we just did 2 seasons about skills, and many of the, one of the sort of the biggest pieces of advice from the leaders that we interviewed on the podcast was, nobody has this figured out, pick a place to start and iterate from there, right? The experiment mindset. The second is, how heavy a solution do you really need? A lot of these solutions are very, very heavy in terms of the implementation requirements and the maintenance requirements. And sometimes you just don't need it, right? Like, do you really need a talent marketplace, or can you get away with like a talent marketplace light that's some of the like add-on that can be done as an add-on to the existing technologies, right? What's your exit strategy? So one of the things that we've become very aware of, especially in the last year, right, is that there is way more turnover in technology than there used to be. And so understanding when you're putting a piece of technology in, what are you going to do to take it, when it's met its life cycle, or well, a couple pieces there. One is, if you know you're going to experiment with it, make sure that you have a short contract so that you're not like dedicated to a piece of technology that you know you're not going to use. Second is figure out what you're going to do with the data that is in that technology after you turn it off, right? Where's the data going to go? And it's much easier to figure those things out before you put it in than as you're already sunsetting it. And the final idea is, what tech aligns with your skills philosophy? So do you feel like you need to, do you want a taxonomy or an ontology? Do you want, there are all these questions. And what you want to find is a vendor that kind of aligns with what you want to do with tech, with skills. Also, to your point, similar to the coaching question, right? What exactly are you trying to do with skills? Are you just trying to understand what skills exist in your organization? Are you trying to specifically help people move around the organization to different jobs? Are you, right? So exactly what is the business case that you're trying to solve? And that will determine the vendor that you choose. So those were all the slides I had prepared. RedThread has a number of infographics and other resources on our website that are complimentary that you're welcome to check out. So we have one on coaching, we have one on skills and competencies, we have one on career mobility. We will have a report on mobility tech in a couple of months. We already have a report on coaching tech. So if you want to dig into these topics that I've talked about, please feel free to check out those resources. Also, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Right. Before we throw it open to questions, can we give a big round of applause to Heather, please? So, any more questions, Heather? I think you did a great job of tackling them as we were going along, actually. So.
Yeah, I appreciated it. Thank you.
Nice. Any more?
Yep.
Right.
So when you had the kind of 4x4 graph earlier, it looked like quite a competitive market in this space. What are the actual suppliers doing to differentiate themselves? Is it like a price point? Is it something different?
So some of them are basically doing, yes, price points, so scalability, right? So you can do this for many, many more employees at the same price. For coaching in particular, right? One of the big value propositions is, hey, you're spending this much on executive coaching already. You could spend the same amount to do coaching for like this many more employees, right? So that's one that's fairly common. When I asked, so Dani Johnson was the one who did the coaching research, and when I asked her, are there any vendors that I really need to know about for this in preparation for this presentation? Like any briefing recordings that I should definitely watch? She was like, "We all said the same thing." So honestly, I think it is such a new space that what they think is differentiating is not actually differentiating anymore.
Yeah, I was particularly curious at the top left quadrant, very, very crowded, and that's the people external resources.
Yeah. And if you notice that quadrant at the top left is it's a bunch of established learning tech providers as well that are sort of adding on coaching functionalities because they're saying, hey, people, there's money to be had in coaching, so they're adding on. Not to say that's not helpful, but yeah.
Anyone else? No? Great. In which case, go and get in the queue for beer. We'll see you downstairs. But one more round of applause, please, for Heather.